but we want to make sure that your kayak doesn't tip. And we want to make sure you can land the plane or it doesn't crash. We want to make sure that your legacy doesn't get mismanaged.
Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to the Retire in Texas podcast, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Darryl Lyons.
Hey, this is Darryl Lyons, CEO and co-founder of PAX Financial Group, and you're listening to Retire in Texas. This is information that's not intended to provide specific investment, tax, or legal advice. Visit paxfinancialgroup.com for more information. So years ago, I had a client, this was 2013, they came in and they had $2 million. They gave me $1 million to invest, and then they wanted to, I'll call it DIY, do-it-yourself investing. And so really good relationship. We did some really good planning, some strategies to help them retire. The annual checkup came around, and I was a little nervous that I might get fired. The reason I was nervous is because in 2013, the stock market represented by the S&P 500 was up 30%. It seems to me, I don't have this dead on accurate, but it seems to me that the portfolio was up about 20% that year. So if the standard of our relationship was the stock market, we were, let's say, did 20% and the market did 32%. And the reason is that we had bonds and other things that diversified. And so I wasn't necessarily disappointed with the results, but just how am I going to be judged? Specifically when he has this other set of money out there that he very likely just put in the stock market altogether and made 30% or maybe even more if he was, I guess, got lucky. So the checkup came around. Again, good relationship, but I was a little nervous that, I might get fired because I didn't know what his expectations were. And so I asked him how he did on his do-it-yourself portfolio, thinking I was going to have to substantiate why we got 20 and the market did 30. And he said, I didn't invest it. I said, what do you mean you didn't invest it? He goes, well, I didn't know if we were in a bubble. There was, this fiscal cliff, a government shutdown, an Affordable Care Act was happening. It was just a lot going on. I was really nervous. So let me understand this straight. Now, I didn't tell him this. I didn't have to. You wanted to save the annual fee. We had 1% on that fee. You wanted to save 1%, right? Yeah. Again, I'm role playing in my head. You wanted to save 1% and you missed out on a 20% return. That's what happens when we DIY, do it yourself, invest or financial planning. I get DIY stuff all the time. I mean, I have fixed toilets. Granted, I've had to run to Lowe's 5 times because I didn't have what I needed. I've tried to fiddle with a fireplace issue I have right now. I've YouTubed it many times. Some of the projects I've done, some of them I failed in my DIY experience. I bought a really nice tree that I did kill. I probably should have had a company called Millburgers do it instead. I wanted to save some money. I don't know if my wife came on here, if you asked her, am I good at DIY? She'd probably go, Sometimes my patience is tested. I know that for years in our old house, the shower, what was hot was cold and what was cold was hot. It's just, you just don't do it all the time. So maybe my second or third iteration of whatever I was trying to fix would have been better than the first, but that's the problem with DIY. And it's fine. I get it. I want to save money, and so do all of us. But when it comes to our money, we just, in our retirement, in our future, in our nest egg, the mistakes, we just can't afford to make mistakes. They're not like $10 or $20, even $100. They could be hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. I guess some people could DIY their investments. Let me kind of give you the profile of that type of person. Even then, I think we would be subject to being skeptical. Let me give you three profiles or 3 attributes of the DIY investor. One is they have time and they have consistent time. We're under the assumption that their health would be good in perpetuity, but suppose somebody's 65, they have time at the time that they retire, but then they have a stroke and they're checked out for 6 months. time is peculiar because we could have it now, but tomorrow could be lost in terms of our attention span. So that's a tricky one. But if you have a lot of time and no hiccups in life, which is really, I don't know anybody that lives in that world, that would be one attribute of being able to DIY it. Two, if you have the tools, I'm telling you today versus even 30 years ago, there's more tools on investing and financial planning out there than ever, blogs and YouTube videos and all kinds of tools. The challenge is it's like a chainsaw. If you don't use it properly, you could really get hurt. And some of the tools can be problematic because the assumptions that are used, that are embedded in the tools, inflation factors or assumed rate of returns or even back testing can mislead and mess up our judgment. The third is attribute that you would have to have if you DIY it is the emotional fortitude. I think we overstate our ability to navigate some very scary times, and me included. I want to be humble enough to say that I've trained myself over the years, and we've created systems and processes, but I'm still subject to concerns that happen in our geopolitical world that we live in today. And so I've doing this over 20 years, and I recognize that I can be emotionally triggered. I can't imagine that if somebody were doing it on their own, how that might impact their decision making. So those three things you'd have to assume that are rock solid: the time, the tools, and the emotional fortitude. Let me give you some mistakes that people make when they DIY their investments. That I think are just examples of just mistakes that happen. Let's assume that you retire and you start taking distributions from your investments and the market goes down. If you're taking distributions and withdrawals from your investments while the market's going down, you're eating your seed. So if the market goes back up, you won't recover as well. So that's one. Two, overlooking tax strategies. If you miss your RMD, it's subject to a pretty hefty penalty. If you don't think about your Medicare surcharges, you could be paying more on Medicare. Those are some things that you have to consider. Number three, I think, you could mess up. I've seen it where, you municipal, what I'm trying to say is the tax efficiency of portfolios. So like it's better to have municipal bond funds in your non-taxable accounts. So those are little things, but it makes it to where your tax return is prettier. I did talk about emotional fortitude and, selling at the wrong times, buying at the wrong times. And then another fifth example I will say is just not being able to navigate through some of the Roth conversion stuff, or maybe even, properly utilizing health savings accounts. Those are some things as an examples of do-it-yourself investing and financial planning. Individuals often misstep or overlook, and an advisor who's competent, who's engaged, should be able to navigate through those things. This is just tricky, this idea of navigating your entire life savings. It's not. It's hard. It really is. I mean, we spend every single moment of our days, I would say literally, but that's not true, but very much thinking deeply about this, while you, and rightfully so, should be thinking about your kids and your grandkids. And so I feel like we get to carry as advisors this emotional backpack, this burden, so that way people can do life. And I mean, it's still your money and it's still your responsibility, but I do feel that we can carry that burden quite a bit. There is a need when you're paying an advisor to manage expectations. I had somebody tell me a long time ago that I just want you to make me rich, and that's not necessarily my role. And I think compounding, let me say it differently. I don't think compounding works. I know compounding works, not only because the math is legit, but I've seen it over time. And by the way, compounding works if you're 30 and if you're 60. So don't say that, I'm 60 or 70 and I can't get compounding returns. That's not true. I mean, your legacy can be amplified if you think about compounding and leverage it at any age. So please don't discount compounding despite your age. It's time horizon. So I'm not going to make you an advisor. Frankly, is not going to make you rich. The compounding will very likely help. But the main thing is they're just going to help you keep it, grow it, and hopefully pass it along wisely. So that's kind of defining the expectation of what somebody is paying for. And so I'll have people come in who did do it yourself, and over the years, just trying to think about some of those things that we've had to kind of fix, maybe bad haircuts, so to speak. We've had to fix some, I would say, unoptimized withdrawals. Like, hey, you should be taking out of your investments. You should be taking out money from your Roth, not your traditional, because you have different buckets of money. And the question is, which one should you be taking out of, and mapping that out long term. So those are things that we'll have to fix. Again, a bad haircuts kind of thing. Lack of diversification, maybe too much concentration in a specific investment class that maybe not enough in another. And oftentimes do-it-yourself investors get lost when they drift into like the international space or small cap stocks or, alternative investments. And so a lot of times when I see do-it-yourself investors, they fail to have a, proper allocation to those types of investments. Third, another, like, I guess a bad haircut we might have to fix. And some of these things are just unfixable because if you trigger Social Security, it's, I won't say it's impossible, but it's generally impossible to unwind it. But, just the timing of strategies and the timing of when you get Social Security, those are things that we have to at least address. Some other bad haircuts that we've had to fix is, like I said, healthcare savings accounts. An interesting one is, and this is tough because if somebody had one and they didn't fund it in the past because, they just didn't think about it, you can't go back and fund these things. We can just fund them going forward. So those are just things that it's like a bummer that we can't do anything about it, but we can try to fix it going forward. Or, some last one as an example of, bad haircuts we might fix is somebody giving money to a charity and it might be better if they did it through a donor advised fund to be able to manage the tax benefits in a specific calendar year. So those are all kind of like bad haircut things that I think about when somebody has DIY'd their investments. Like, let me give you an example, an analogy. Years ago, I went kayaking down the Devil's River, which is really cool. And that's over near Del Rio, for those that don't know, who aren't in Texas. It's very rural, but beautiful. I mean, absolutely breathtaking. And I actually camped overnight, 2 nights on like a little island and then on the side of a cliff. Just a very awesome experience. But a guide on a river is a good example of how this relationship with an advisor works. And, if you have a good guide, they're going to help kind of anticipate things, so to speak, maybe waterfalls, kind of read the water, honestly manage your energy. You need to row harder here. You can relax there. There's some danger here. Watch out for snakes, those kind of things. And, what is the cost of a guide? I mean, there's a cost to hire a guide. What's the cost of capsizing a raft or a kayak? I mean, it's a lot more expensive. So that's I think the idea of a guide is a good way to look at your advisor relationship, and you're paying for a guide. And it's sometimes hard to prove a negative in a relationship, but the advisor, generally speaking, should. And there's enough research here that supports this. You can look at, if you need to, like Vanguard's Advisor Alpha studies are good ones, that they're able to guide you appropriately and help navigate some of these troubled waters in our economy. One more example, at the risk of analogizing. Let's say you have this private jet. We'll call it Retirement One, and it's fast, it's sleek, and the problem is you can fly it, but landing it is still not really good, especially under certain conditions, if the weather changes. or let's, kind of keep with this analogy. The markets are, volatile, VIX is up, tax law changes, inflation, always changing, right? Just like the weather. And so you're trying to learn about how to land this in real time. And obviously you're very nervous, as you should be, but you have a co-pilot, right? And that co-pilot has the ability to review the gauges, kind of look at the controls, the dials, corresponding with the towers, making sure you don't run out of fuel. That co-pilot is there to guide you along that journey, specifically when it's the consequences are extremely high. Now, an advisor does not fly the plane for you. It's still your plane, but you're the pilot, but you're not. What I don't want you to do is YouTubing how to land a plane at 600 miles an hour. Or I don't want you to YouTube how to navigate, or ChatGPT, I should say, how to navigate your investment portfolio real time. I want, in my professional opinion, I want you to have a very, very good co-pilot along this journey with you. I want to finish with this and close this out with this. Again, we always want to save money. I'm just, over the years, have seen this with high degree of conviction. We can't mess around with the lifetime that we have and the money required to support the lifestyle we want. This is not fixing toilets. This is really, really serious, and we take it serious at PAX. This is your life. We acknowledge and respect there's a fee associated with that, and we want to earn every bit of it. Obviously within our control, there's certain things that we can't control. But we want to make sure that your raft, your kayak doesn't tip. And we want to make sure you can land the plane or it doesn't crash. We want to make sure that your legacy doesn't get mismanaged. So many of our listeners may be in a position where they're like, well, that's, do-it-yourself investing would never cross my mind. But you have family members that believe that they can do it. And I want to encourage you to have them just check with an advisor to get a second opinion, because they may be doing it fine now, but in a moment of panic or chaos, it could destroy their future. And yes, I've seen it over the years. And so that's why we do what we do, and we take it very seriously. So thank you again for listening. And I appreciate your attention. And I want to remind you that you think different when you think long-term. Have a great day.